Well, it's Thursday, and you know what that means. It's time to get a take on the news from the left, right, and middle. From the left is our own Wallace Ford, who is a Rise News contributor, political blogger, and professor at Medgar Evers College. There you go. I got that in for you, Wallace.
Thank you.
And from the right is Washington attorney Horace Cooper, joining us from Washington, D.C. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Good evening.
Hey, I want to start this conversation with where we left off with our contributor, Akhtar Khan. And, of course, the headline today is the president spoke to the press, addressed the nation about potential strategy for dealing with ISIS. And, of course, he says he is well within his executive powers to order airstrikes. He's already done it in Iraq. Everybody's holding their breath to see if he's going to do it in Syria. I want to talk to you, gentlemen, about the political ramifications. Does he shoot himself in the foot? And, Horace, I'll start with you, by not getting the full backing of Congress before moving ahead with the policy in Syria?
I think he actually could do both things. He could say that when Congress returns, because they're just coming back next week, he is expecting them to send him an authorization, and he is now taking action initially that will be supplemented by that support. I don't know that he needs to act unilaterally. I think as an executive, he's got a lot of flexibility, and as long as he's going around saying we don't have a strategy, it's the JV team, and he's now having to play catch up, he probably would be well served politically to get Congress to come on board.
Well, I think I do agree with the notion that the president certainly has the right and the power to go forward with this military action the way he's proposed to do so. The full backing of Congress is something that's in textbook somewhere. He's not going to get the full backing of Congress, not this Congress, that's for sure. But as far as this notion that we're talking about a JV team or something like that, we're talking about uncharted territory. There's just never been an organization like ISIS in the world. It's almost like something out of some superhero comic book of some of the evil mastermind villains with all of this money and power and what have you. And you have to have a reasonable way to address this. I think a lot of the criticism that's been addressed towards President Obama comes from the fact that he takes thoughtful steps as opposed to shoot from the hip or shoot from the lip. And I think this is just another example of that. It is a terrible situation that we have in the Middle East. I don't know that there's anyone who could say that there's a playbook strategy to pursue here. You have to kind of figure it out as you go forward, which is what this president is doing, what this administration is doing.
And Horace, there are whisperings that Republicans don't want to have to be involved in this anyway. This is an election year, and they want to be able to stay out of it, stay far enough away from it to blame Obama if and when something goes wrong.
Well, if that's the case, I would definitely, if I were in his shoes, want to make sure that we have the motion up, have a vote on it. We can start with the Senate since the Democrats control it, get that passed, show that it's bipartisan, and get pressure to do it. As I said, though, he doesn't have to say, I'm going to wait to take action. He can take some preliminary steps. Now, the problem politically is actually when you say there's been nothing like this, just think of this other organization, much smaller, less aggressive. It's called Al-Qaeda, and it was something that has captivated the attention of all the leaders on the globe. Now, if that smaller organization required the time and attention, how much more so should the president have been giving this? Saying, as he bragged, because now remember, al-Baghdadi comes from Al-Qaeda.
Well, he was actually
I didn't interrupt you. I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah.
At his convention, he bragged, Al-Qaeda is on the run and GM is alive. Now, I'm looking. GM now, it turns out, is killing a lot of Americans, and now how many will ISIS end up killing? Because the president hasn't kept his eye on the ball. Politically, he absolutely needs to bring Congress in, and if he thinks that the Republicans won't do it because it's a political posturing on their part, that's a double win for him.
All right, Wallace, I'm going to change subjects before I'll give you 10 seconds to respond to
what I would just say, Mr. Cooper, just because you say it doesn't make it so, that's all. But let's move on. Okay?
Oh, he's baiting you, Horace. I like that. Let me change pages a little bit, talk a little bit about the conflict that has been going on in Ferguson, Missouri, around the use of excessive force, whether or not there was use of excessive force in the shooting of Mike Brown Jr. And I'll just simply ask the question that you suggested, Horace, but I'm going to start with you first, Wallace. Has there been a rush to judgment?
Well, I don't think that if we're talking about the notion with respect to the police officer and whether or not his actions are wrongful, obviously, ultimately, this has to be determined in a court of law. But I think when an unarmed person is shot 6 times in broad daylight and with no signs that there was a life and death struggle, certainly, you have to say that it certainly warrants the attention of the criminal justice system. And so that's where we are now. You can have an opinion. I can have an opinion. I'm just guessing, and Mr. Cooper may have an opinion with respect to it, but certainly it is the type of activity that does warrant the full and direct attention of the law enforcement process, beginning with a grand jury. I would expect an indictment with respect to this, and I expect a trial.
Horace?
Okay, so that's
not a rush to judgment. Pardon me,
A
Horace.
rush to judgment is expecting a trial and expecting an indictment, and also getting a visit by the highest law enforcement officer in the land, Mr. Eric Holder. I got 2 words here. Dylan Taylor, a white kid, shot by a black police officer. Now, there have been protests, actually, regular ones, happening in Salt Lake City. Mr. Taylor, he had his own little criminal history as well, but he was unarmed. No call to the family, no effort to visit for the funeral, to send high-profile representatives of the White House, no effort for FBI presence, no calls for criminal indictment.
But aren't you missing the point with making this point, Horace? And I'm going to speak from my perch in the center in that the issues are different. First of all, Mike Brown Jr., to our knowledge, had no criminal history, as this other kid that you just mentioned does. But
yes, he does. We have it on video. But go on. Next point.
Well, that remains to be proven if you're going to be fair about it. But this really goes to the tension between race in this country and in that community specifically. Don't know that you have that same tension in Utah. You can't forget about that.
In Utah, the population is overwhelmingly white, and there are a few black officers, and yet the black officer is the person that ended up killing the white individual. You have a race issue if that's the way you want to look at it.
Okay,
the problem is people rushed to judgment instead of letting an investigation take place. I'm going to make this quick point.
It pains me to say it. I've got to stop. We are out of time. Thank you both, Wallace Ford, Horace Cooper. We'll take this up again. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Okay.